We have been with you since Election Day with the Ignite Elections Update 2025. We kept your company throughout the conduct of the elections when the polls opened from 6 a.m. all the way to 6 p.m. and beyond. Since then, we've had various experts, panels, making up panels who can help you understand the politics of Guyana and what these elections mean. Many of them were able to contextualize the 2025 elections in historical context, in socioeconomic and geopolitics. We've heard from several prominent Guyanese who I'm sure added value to your understanding of what transpired here in 2025 in terms of these elections, and perhaps helped you to appreciate where we are as a nation so much more than before the elections. This afternoon, I'm particularly honored to be joined by a very distinguished guest. I had the honor of working in his office, perhaps not directly, but in an annex of his office under his leadership. And so I'm particularly honored this afternoon to have the pleasure of having a conversation with former President of Guyana, His Excellency Donald Ramotar. Your Excellency, thank you very much for taking the time out to join us. And it's indeed, as I said, a pleasure to be able to talk with you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, the 2025 elections have come but not gone. The conduct of the polls closed on the evening of Monday, and as customary, we've had to be waiting on GCOM to go through their very tedious process of tabulation and verification of those results. Many have observed, though, that we have come a far way. It is much improved from previous cycles.
From 5 months waiting for the next election.
Well, particularly from the 2020 5 months in Broglio. But traditionally, we've had to wait for days for this tabulation and verification process. But this time, GCOM instituted by law and through reforms a very unique feature that allowed for the uploading of every single SOP digitally onto their website, so that citizens and the electorate are able to see their verified and signed SOPs as GCOM sees them. And so it perhaps allowed for an easier wait with the electorate having a glimpse of what the results should be. Your assessment of elections 2025, it was said to be perhaps one of the most consequential elections since independence.
It went very smoothly. Election day itself went very smoothly. I voted in Pleasant Secondary School, and I thought when I voted there, it was quite early in the morning I voted. It was a little bit slow, but by the time I left there, the line was cleared. So I think we had, the process was very smooth, and I think what you just mentioned about the change in how the GCOM's decision or the law that allows GCOM to put the statements of poll up as places that are finished counting will take away a lot of the absence of information that the population didn't have in many of the elections, which the opposition tried to exploit in order to create problems within the society. So this time they had all the information. I see very late they're trying to make some issues to delay talking about recounting of ballot boxes and so forth. But I have every confidence that the results would be the same. I don't think we saw what happened in 1997 elections when they called for a forensic audit. And one of the report there was that they found not a single fraudulent ballot from the report, the CARICOM team that did the investigation. And from 1992, I think the elections were more or less free or fair. I thought the 2015 elections and probably the 2011 elections were the forerunner to what happened in 2020. I think that the PNC managed to, infiltrate GCOM at that time, and they declared those elections using spreadsheets other than the ballots, the polling statements itself. But other than that, I think that this elections, the decision to upload the results, the SOPs, immediately after the counting, has removed that absence, that gap of information that people had.
So that's a game changer in
that's a major,
electoral.
major, and a very important, decision that was taken there, and that has helped people to see what is going on very clearly.
You must have had the benefit by now of viewing or listening to the various preliminary reports issued by the observer missions. We've heard from the Commonwealth, we've heard from the Carter Center, and others. Even the local observers have already started pronouncing, given their preliminary findings. What is your takeaway?
I haven't had the opportunity to read the report, the preliminary report. I just saw what's in the newspaper at this point in time, and I didn't get a chance to look at all their press conferences that they had. But I sometimes think that there are a group of people in this country who seems to have some good connections with these kind of organizations. And I was thinking, particularly the European Union report, I think they were more or less trying to emphasize a lot of things that are really not issues, really not big issues, talking about question of voters lists. That happens in every country where you have continuous registration. In fact, I was involved in the decision. I was then General Secretary of the PPP in in 2005, 2006, when we had a meeting, the PPP, the PNC. We discussed having a possibility where the government can call information, because the point was made that if you have a no confidence vote, you cannot call an elections on the Constitution, because you have to wait until GCOM says it's ready and all of that. And those are some of the decisions that made us agree to go to continuous registration since then. And we knew that these things would have happened. And it's not strange. Jamaica just had its election. They have a population of 2.8 million people. Their electoral roll is 2.1 million. Barbados got continuous registration too. They got a population of 282,000 people, and their voters list is 237,000 people. The Netherlands got a population of 17 million people, and their electoral roll is 13 million. So I think once you have these continuous registration, you have this issue. What is clear is that there was no fraudulent vote, that all the people who voted were real people, genuine people, no impersonation. All the system was in place to ensure that the elections were free and fair. So I think, and that is the key to free and fair election, that the people who voted were people who were entitled to vote, and they voted free and fair.
That much was a common denominator in all of the observer missions pronouncements so far, that there was absolutely no evidence, notwithstanding the bloated nature of the list that they highlighted, that they found absolutely no evidence that indicated that any voter was able to vote who was not entitled and legally.
But I object to the word bloated. I don't think the list is bloated. The list is composed of Guyanese who were registered legally. Some of them might have migrated. All those who are dead in Guyana, the names are off the list. Because every month, the Births and Deaths Department must send a list of all those who died to the commission there, and where they take off the list. I know that because as General Secretary, when I was in the PPP, those lists used to be brought to me by our commissioners who were there, that these are the lists that came, and these are the names that are coming off the voters list and so forth. So I know that for a fact, and therefore I know that everyone any dead person on the list is very, very minimal with people who live here.
But apart from their concern about the list being bloated, two of the other issues that seem to be a common denominator too, that almost all of the international observers zoomed in on, had to do with what is perceived to be the abuse of state resources in the elections and the creation of an uneven playing field as a result of incumbency. And the other issue seemed to surround electoral financing. In both cases, the Carter Center was very keen in observing that the issue of incumbency and the advantage that accrues to a sitting government in election is not unique to Guyana. It is a global phenomenon that is there in all democracies, and that it is up to the local society to craft frameworks that seek to regulate, however the Guyanese people see fit, how that is addressed. They also said the same on the issue of campaign financing, that it has to be an indigenous framework that is decided upon, perhaps through the pending constitutional reform process.
No, I agree with the financing, the electoral finance, and I think something has to be done as far as that is concerned. But incumbency offers certain advantages. So what did they want? That the government should not open roads, government should not open hospitals, they build schools, they open the schools and so forth. And those things appears to offer some advantage in some regard, but I don't think it's a kind of an advantage that can sway the voters in such a decisive way. Because they know from the very beginning the school is going to be built, this hospital is going to be built, this road is going to be built. So when they're finished, you got to open them. I see the government resisted the temptation of opening the Demerara Harbor Bridge, because I suspect they are sensitive to some of the same type of criticism, and that is a major project and a great achievement for our country, but they didn't rush to do that. But other areas, I think, for the communities and so forth. So I think that's normal for them to have, and as you mentioned yourself, that's not unique to Guyana. That is part of having the incumbency. When the PNC was in government in the past, you had the same type of advantage. We never complained. We continued to work.
And surely the multiple mega and well-supported fundraisers held by the PPP would have adequately financed its campaign.
Yes, no, that's very clear. I don't think that there was a lot of resources from the state transferred to the government. Naturally, ministers will use their vehicles, they will use their cars, and things like that. So that's where the state comes in. And because they're still ministers, until new ministers are sworn in. The president is still president until another president is sworn in. So I think they're making more a mountain out of a molehill in that regard. I don't think it's a really, really big issue, but maybe some of the things about the media, maybe there should be some allocation of, I know in the past, in years gone by, they used to allocate political parties in the parliament used to be a portion like radio time, to make a speech on the radio based on your strength in the parliament and so forth. Maybe they should go back to look at some of those things and to ensure that. But I don't think the newspapers, the government newspapers, banned other political parties from advertising in them, or advertising on the radio station, or advertising on the television station and so forth. So some of these things are difficult. It sounds good to talk about them in theory, but putting them in practice is another issue.
There was also observations about the composition of the commission. The Carter Center said they didn't particularly like the fact that it was being referred to as the Carter formula, because they would certainly like to see reform there to include more independent civil society actors on the commission as against what obtains with only political appointees.
Well, that could be examined, but let me just give you a little bit about the composition of the Elections Commission. But you know what it was before 92? The PNC controlled everything. They had some bullers and many other people who they were there to rig elections, not to have free and fair elections. Carter came and brokered this agreement for the 1992 elections. And the PNC liked it so much that they were the ones who recommended that it be put into the Constitution. Because normally people don't put the composition into the Constitution. It's more administrative outside, but they liked it a lot and they put it in the Constitution. And I don't know if let's take, for instance, what happened in 2020. If you then had people with strong convictions and so forth, if you had some of these people from civil society who didn't give a damn who win or who lose and so forth, maybe we might have had a different outcome in the election. So I think it has I understand where they're coming from, but I don't see that this composition preventing free and fair elections from occurring in the country. And if let's say, if you don't have a PNC presence in the Constitution, knowing the PNC as well as I do, then you mightn't have a city, you mightn't have a country. How they will say anybody else has gone and sell them out and what have you. So I don't think they probably don't know our country's politics enough. They don't know of some of our history enough. But you know, I think you should take what they said into consideration to see how far you could reach it, but also take into consideration what we have to deal with here.
I was particularly pleased that that they indicated that any such reforms must be a Guyanese solution. As a Guyanese, I feel proud that a foreign entity would defer to the Guyanese people to come up with their own frameworks and solutions, and perhaps we take it from there. The 2025 elections being characterized in the lead up to those elections throughout the campaign as perhaps being one of the most consequential since independence. What are the elements you believe that were at play that would have made it one of the most consequential?
Well, that's the opinion of some people, the people who say it's most consequential. I think they're probably talking because we have oil now in the society, that the society is growing. The same type of restrictions, financial, shortage of finance, shortage of resources that we have, those have been reduced. Not that there aren't shortage of resources. I think there will always be shortage of resources, but it's not now as acute as it used to be. So I don't know if that is why they use the term consequential elections and so forth. To me, if I use that term as the most consequential elections, I would use it more from the point of view of my experience of the previous government's performance, the PNC performance up to 1992 and then from 2015 to 2020, when they had an opportunity to do things. And then I would say, I believe that if they would have won the election despite all that this government did in the past, then I think that would have been a tragedy for this country, because I don't see them having the ability to really manage the country as the last 5 years that the PPP government did. So from that point of view, I would say it's but I don't know what they meant. What was their...
And you're not seeing them having the ability to manage the country the way it was managed in the past 5 years? What do you put that down to? Leadership? Lack of leadership in the PNC these days?
I think it's a mentality of the PNC. If you look at 2015 when they got into the government, what was one of the first things that they did? They raised their own pay and hid it and lied about it for a long time. The PNC sees government as a vehicle to enrich the elite. Despite the talk about their supporters, they never really care about the working class, the working people of the country, to give them a proper life and so forth. It was more of an elitist type of thing. And they generally use the state apparatus to, and that is why they had planned from the very beginning that once they get into government, they were not going to come out. They were going to rig elections. And that is why they didn't concern themselves what people felt about them raising their salary without doing a day's work. Or if they get a sign-in bonus and they think it was a gift and all of that to them and so on and so forth. It is clear to me that many of the measures that they took, they promised that they would have reduced the VAT. When they were, after about 3 years, when they were forced to reduce it, to drop it to 14%, what they did, they spread it on all the items, the basic food items, the educational items, medicines, everything that the PPP had zero rated in the past. They put on, they collected far more money with VAT with 14% than we were collecting when it was 16%, because we had zero rated a lot of important items that people tend to use day to day, and in students, in computers, IT stuff, medicines, medical equipment for hospital, all of those things we had zero rated. So it is very clear that by their actions, not by what they say of themselves, but by their action, you see that these people just want power in order to use it as a vehicle to enrich themselves. The PPP, on the other hand, constantly, whenever they're in government, try their best from the very beginning to ensure that as far as possible you have equal opportunity for people, that as the resources of the country, as far as possible, is being distributed to those who really need it, and so on and so forth.
Unity of our people.
And they also the PPP concentrate a lot on economic development. I hear them talking about, in order to try to denigrate the last 5 years, they were saying that we were building infrastructure, but infrastructure is indispensable towards having development in your economy, to have development in production and other areas and so forth. So if you look at the record of all the PPP, when we had limited resources, you could see where we were putting our resources into the productive sector of the economy, and as far as we could have afforded, into the social sectors, education, health, housing. PNC, look, I mean, people forget, they got short memories. There was, let's say by 1980 in this country, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs had a bigger allocation on education, health, housing, and agriculture put together. Why? Because they were stealing elections, they were mismanaging the country, but they wanted to keep a good face outside. So that was most important for them, to keep a good face outside, while teachers didn't have chalk in school, the hospital didn't have any kind of services and so forth. So that is why I would say it would have been a real, it was consequential that we win this election, so that the progress that we started can continue.
Many of the policy initiatives instituted by the coalition under David Granger that became so egregious to the citizenry of Guyana. A government going into office and raising its own salary before they attend to the people. Implementation of more than 200 new taxes and fees to burden the people. declaring that the government had no responsibility for the creation of jobs and that people were basically on their own, and not really looking to do some of the things you talked about in the social sector and the productive sector. Yet we saw in this campaign, the presidential candidate of APNU, PNC-led APNU, Aubrey Norton, declared publicly that he believed David Granger managed the country properly and that he subscribes to the philosophy of David Granger. It would seem that people listened to that and realized that they were getting more of the same of the coalition and rejected the PNC under Aubrey Norton. Effectively, I believe, some of the analysts that we've had have indicated that what we're seeing from these results is perhaps the beginning of the end of the PNC as we know it. They have fallen in Linden to a newcomer. They have fallen in Region 4 to the PPP, so they've lost both of their bastions of support. They haven't won a single electoral district across the country for the first time in history. Do you believe the PNC is the beginning of the end?
Well, I've learned never to say never. But it is very clear that the PNC is in a very serious crisis. And it's not because of Aubrey Norton, as I think he will get all the blame for it. I think it's the problem when they lost government in 1992. They have had a lot of crisis in the leadership. Hamilton Green breaking away, and then you had all kinds of difficulties. This last time with elections, there was a claim within the PNC ranks that the elections was rigged against Greenwich for Granger and so forth. So I think the problems that they had with the PNC over the years have been enormous and it's having an impact on them. The second thing I believe that is causing them to have this great setback that they have had is the question that their propaganda, it does not correspond to reality, and therefore they're becoming discredited. Not only the members of the PNC, because I don't know if everybody, if Henry Jeffrey and Lincoln Lewis and others who write, David Hines, if they are members of the PNC. But they tend to attack the government with racism and discrimination, and it doesn't exist. The government has absolutely no policy. There's no one policy that you can point to that this government is discriminating against anyone. And people are beginning to see that. So what used to be working for them with some of the older generation as people pass on and so forth, they are just being discredited in the eyes of the people. Just before this elections, a couple of weeks before this elections, I wrote an article asking, is racism losing its potency? And this election shows that is actually happening. And the PNC and those who are supposed to be their friends are discrediting the PNC more and more by talking about these things that really does not really exist. You believe
it's a Gen Z electorate or demographic that is discrediting
I think they depended so long on racism to keep their mass support. From the time of Barnum right up, race was a very important factor for them to keep their mass support. That they know that seems to be discrediting them, because people can look at their own experiences and see. And I think that is another big factor. And I think I heard Vice President Jagdeo making the point that they took a very opportunistic position siding with Win. And I believe that he's right about that they went with Win in the hope that Win would have split our votes and so on and so forth. And Win, because Win seems to have got a lot of money, Win seems to have taken over a lot of their propaganda arms and a lot of their own people and so on and so forth. And Win walk again. Now, when they began to realize that and began to criticize Win, I think it was a little bit too late, too little too late for them. So they're in real crisis, I think. It's a very serious crisis that the PNC is in. But as I've said, I've learned to say never, that I wouldn't pronounce the PNC dead.
But against the backdrop of the historic rivalry, you were there from the inception of the political movement in Guyana.
Not from the inception.
Well, in modern, let's say in contemporary.
My whole adult life.
Right. Against that backdrop, how would you characterize the developments we've seen in these elections, the entry of a new horse in the race that galvanized significant support and has replaced the PNC, APNU, as the main opposition, and has perhaps helped to hasten the degradation of PNC's hold across Guyana. Does that bring you any sense of satisfaction to see, after all these years working for the cause of the PPP as General Secretary for more than a decade, serving as our 8th executive president, does it bring you any satisfaction to see that the PPP is now standing on a mountain within the body politic with the PNC on a downward spiral?
I would put it this way. That the PNC needs to relook at a lot of their modus operandi. It doesn't give me great satisfaction to see that they're down. I would like to see them contesting these elections on the basis of ideas and programs, and on the manifestos and on arguments, rational arguments and so forth. I think this election should tell them that this is the direction they should go. And their over-reliance on race as a factor to keep their popular base, it shows that those days are coming to an end. As far as the win is concerned, again, as I said, I speak cautiously because, you never can predict everything in the future. But I don't think that they will hold on to this support for a long time. This is not a loyal voting bloc voting for them. They haven't really produced. I think this was a more of a rejection to the PNC. And I would see a lot of the people who voted for them are people in transition, that they didn't want to vote for the PNC because they kind of rejected, but they haven't reached the stage to vote for the PPP. So I see them in transition. If the other political parties don't come with plans and programs and contest against the PPP on the basis of those plans and programs, and if they're only going to hold on to race, then I think they will disappear. But if they believe that they have better plans and programs and to debate it, to convince the people, then okay, if they have good plans and programs, they could survive.
As a seasoned political animal in Guyana's body politic, one that you've clearly become an institution of politics in Guyana. Surely you see lessons for both the PPP and PNC with the advent and rise of this newcomer that perhaps didn't have much substance to offer, but yet they were able to galvanize mass support.
I don't think he has done a lot of harm to PPP support. So I think his damage is mainly on the PNC's support. That's where he did most of the damage. I think I get a lot of satisfaction because this struggle that the PPP was waging for national unity was since the split in 1955. Because the party had managed to unite the country in 1953. Remember, we won 18 of the 24 seats in 1953. And then we got a split in 1955. And when the Bornomite PPP lost the 1957 elections, they, on the advice of the colonialists, there's a book called Salvaging Democracy by a woman by the name of Jane Sillery. It's a doctoral thesis. I recommend that people read it to see. She is now the head of the history department of Oxford University. And she did a research having all the correspondences from the governor to the foreign office, from the foreign office to the American office, and all of that. And then you will see that, in fact, in 1959, when Sir Patrick Wellison, who was the governor of British Guyana, when he was leaving his post, he had in one of his reports that he has managed to succeed to make Burnham respectable and acceptable. But unfortunately, he did it at the expense of race relations in the country, which he had himself admitted that they pushed racism. And the PPP has never fallen into that trap. Never fallen into that trap. In 1965, January, less than a month after the PPP came out of government in 1964, Dr. Jagan, then obviously very disappointed in the PNC, to reject his offer of half of the government in 64, before the elections, he charged the PPP members. He said, you have to go and bring over to the PNC's misled a lot of the African Guyanese working class and a lot of the Amerindian people. And he charged the PPP to win them over to their side, because he tried his best, tried to bring back unity, and the PNC betrayed that in that time and sided with the colonial powers. And that is one of the reasons. That is their history. That is their basis. That is their foundation. And that is where I think they need to change now and start to work towards national unity. If they want to build a working class party, it's got to be a working class party to talk about all working people. Look at Lincoln Lewis, who is obviously a strong sympathizer of the PNC. He's the head of the TUC. But he doesn't make it welcoming for the Indian working class to be within the trade union or his trade union. Or look at many of the trade unions that they have. They use them to support the PNC as a captive audience and not to fight for in the interest of the working class and so forth. So I think they have to go back to the drawing board and really honestly examine their position and to recognize that racism is losing its potency.
And the PPP has very proudly been able to use as part of its campaign platform in these elections that it has emerged and grown into becoming the only national party in Guyana, attracting people from all the ethnicities in great numbers as compared to the past. We've seen too in recent past that the PPP has evolved to the point of removing the Marxist ideology from its internal constitution. How do you see the evolution of the PPP to
I
today?
disagree with that. I don't see Marxism was affecting the PPP. In fact, the PPP won the 1992, 1997, all the elections with Marxism. And Marxism, what is Marxism? It's a tool of analysis. Mm-hmm. It's nothing, nothing more or nothing less. It's all it is, a tool of analysis which has as its basis class as the fundamental issue within society and not race and other issues and so forth. So I was one of the persons in the PPP who was not in agreement in removing Marxism, because I believe coming down the line maybe it could have other aspects where people wouldn't have a proper orientation, you know. We should not lose our class orientation of being a pro-working class, pro-workers and farmers party in that regard.
But yet over the years, the PNC was able to...
But I don't think Marxism was an impediment to the PPP. It hasn't stopped the PPP from winning the 2020 elections or any of the other elections that it had. So that's where I don't believe it was an impediment. So I don't see that it was affected us.
But yet over the years, the PNC was able to effectively make it into a boogeyman about your party.
Yeah, but I don't think you have to please the PNC. You have to do what is right.
But you don't believe some positives in terms of the way the party is viewed could emerge from its removal?
I don't see any evidence of it bringing anything more to the PPP. But the PPP hasn't absolutely rejected it as far as I understand. What they have said is that Marxism will no longer be the only ideology in the party, that they are more adopt a more pluralistic position within the party, where the emphasis will be more on the party being a populist type of party where they could embrace Marxists, non-Marxists, and so forth within the ranks of the PPP.
And how do you feel about this?
Well, I think it would offer me at least an opportunity to express my views from a Marxist point of view freely, because I'm not tied by that discipline any longer. That I have to say that I agree everything that the PPP agreed with.
During your tenure, we very unfortunately witnessed in this country what many of the pundits have referred to as perhaps the most irresponsible use of power by any parliamentary opposition in the history of Guyana. Your government was a minority government, and instead of using that advantage in the parliament for consensus and moving the country forward through compromise, the combined opposition sought to derail your government in every way, shape, or form through vindictiveness and spite. There was absolutely no room for compromise with them. You've been able to reflect over the years, and perhaps now that we see so many of the governance policies becoming a reality now, certainly some of the policies that you would have hoped to be able to implement as president were grabbed away from you.
Well, one of the reasons I'm very happy that the government has a very comfortable majority now. It's because my experience is that the PNC was opposing, not only opposing for opposition's sake on the one hand and to get power on the other hand. Let me give you some examples. For instance, if we take the anti-money laundering bill, which goes at the very heart of our financial system. Before the PNC had a majority in the parliament, they voted every year. Every time we had it come up, they voted for it. The moment they had the majority, they voted against. And their whole idea, because their philosophy was, whenever they were in opposition, that the more they can make things bad, it's better for them. Yeah. And that is what they were trying to do. They were trying to sabotage the economy. And my government survived largely because there was a recognition that we did all that we could have possibly done, but we couldn't pass the legislation. So that is why they didn't put us on the blacklist and had us on a gray list. Let's take Amila Falls. They came, I invited them when I came and talked to them about Amila Falls. And I gave them all the information of Amila Falls. Even information that was sensitive commercially. And I told them about it. I told them I'm giving you these things, but this is sensitive stuff. I give them, they had the same material that I had, that I give them. And I told them when we finished making a presentation to them and talked to them and all about it, they had no questions or nothing to say, to give. And I told them, okay, I understand that this is fresh, this is just a presentation. If you take these documents and give it to your specialists, whoever you have confidence in, then you can come back to me and I will provide answers for you. And if necessary, if I don't, I will bring the technical people to explain things to you and so forth. They never came back. When the time came to nearly pass this bill now, the crunch time came now. They came and I spoke with them again. They said nothing. They said they would like to go and see the falls. I arranged for the Army helicopter to fly a team of them to go over, to fly over the falls to see what was happening. And with the expectation that they will appreciate the importance of this project for the country and they will support it. Because a lot of what they were saying about the project was a lie. They said that we was burdening the people with taxation, with debt, not a cent of debt we would have had with the people because it was a boat arrangement. All of that we did, and then they just decided to vote against it because they didn't want us to have hydropower because they think that was going far away in solving the problem that we still have in electricity. And they could have used that to exploit that for political gain. They don't see, I don't think they, up to now, they are unable or they have been unable to appreciate that by being a constructive opposition, like the PPP was for 28 years. Dr. Jagan was, if you go back and see all his speeches in Parliament, he was always offering, whenever he opposed, he was offering alternatives to what the government was putting. He never just opposed for opposition's sake. And I think that is what he was able to win people's mind, even those who didn't vote for him because of prejudice or otherwise. They could recognize his sound argument. And I don't think the PNC see politics in that way, that they can win respect and win hearts and minds by arguments and by debates and by policies and so forth. They think that they have to make things difficult and if possible, break up and burn down and lick up. And that is how they think that they will create conditions for them to go in government.
And so when you saw in these elections political leaders who were contesting the elections, calling openly for the electorate to make the Afrin Ali government a minority government, were they to win, what was your dread quotient having lived through a minority government?
Well, but put it this way, I was sure that the PPP would have won the elections. I didn't have any fear in a minority. In fact, I told some people who were pushing the same kind of line about minority government, I said it's the worst thing that could ever happen to Guyana if you have a minority government, because you will not be able to get anything done. You will have to be negotiating, well, I give you this job or this ministry, and focus on development would be absent. Now this government that is going in now, they don't have that problem. So I was sure that the performance of the government in the last 5 years was good enough to give it a majority. So I didn't have any fear about that, but I warned people who simplistically think that it will make you work together. Let me give you an example where it can't work. You remember, up to now they're criticizing it, and they come back again criticizing the government about appointment of Chancellor and Chief Justice. That was in the 2001 when we were writing the new Constitution. In order to say that we will have better working relationship with the government, that we decided to put that we must have agreement. Well, they had one agreement when we appointed Desiree Bernard. That was the only time the PNC supported us. I remember when I was president, Carl Singh and Ian Chang were acting for more than 8 years already. And when I invited the then opposition leader, Mr. Granger, I said to him, I said, listen, I have had absolutely no complaint about these two people. They have ruled in favor of government, they have ruled against government. Nobody ever made any complaint publicly or privately against their decisions. I therefore have no other proposal than to propose these two people to you. He just said no. No, because I had to get his agreement. He just said no. And we couldn't appoint. But I said to him, I have no grounds to dismiss these people, so I'll keep them on acting.
But many have criticized the PPP's stance on this, arguing that while you got no agreement from the PNC in opposition for the confirmation of these two positions, that the PPP could very well take the higher ground now and do differently instead of doing the same that they did to you?
Well, I am more free to talk now. I don't know what our President Irfan Ali is thinking. But when I look at the decisions that were taken about even can't decide which is half of 65, if 33 is more than 65. And if you don't think that those are political considerations that were in the minds of those judges, and there were many other cases too, the question of you had a case with the appointment of the chairman of the Elections Commission. I think I would have been in a similar position that our president is in right now. I don't see how I could agree to some of these things and so forth.
If we were to zoom in on Linden, prior to your taking office as president, President Jagdeo had devoted an enormous amount of time and resources, even personal attention to the town of Linden and Region 10 to try and win hearts and minds, to the extent where many in the PPP were arguing that he was devoting too much time to that locale versus the base of the PPP, the quarantine and other places. When you came to office, you didn't become as personally involved with Linden as President Jagdeo was. But now that we see that perhaps all of the work to unshackle the minds of the people of Linden to coming to the point where they can consider another party, that now Linden and Region 10 has fallen to the newcomer wind. Do you look back now and perhaps consider that you could have had a more hands-on approach and to see if you could have a better outcome now? Because most of the voters who have abandoned the PNC, more than 10,000 of them, have gone to win instead of to the PPP that was caring and investing and hand-holding and empowering for so long.
I think that Vice President Jagdeo did a lot of good work in Linden, and that has helped a lot of ways. I think it's only a matter of time that we reverse this. As I said, a lot of those people are, at the beginning I told you, I see these votes that they win got as more people in transition, and they will transition to us eventually. And nobody in the PPP that I ever remembered was telling the then President Jagdeo that he was concentrated. We never did that. That's not true. Maybe some supporters might have some idle conversation, but it was never an issue in the PPP to work with Linden. Then President Jagdeo had a full hand, and everybody supported what he was doing, because we see that Linden is an important area, industrial area, workers and PPP, the working class. We never opposed those things. So it's not true, whoever told you that. As far as I am concerned, I had a different position in some issues. I suppose you're talking about the 2012, when we had agreement with the PNC in the budget on the budget for 2012 budget, and they agreed, and then they reneged on it, and then you had the blow up in Linden. I didn't go to Linden because I didn't want to give rioters the satisfaction. I have a different attitude toward that. Maybe President Jagdeo might have gone there and talked to them, but I don't think it was. I don't think that I should have gone there to talk to them. I didn't want to go, and I think that would have been, in my view, I think that would have been encouraging them to do more nonsense than what they were doing there. That totally unnecessary what they did. So I had a different outlook of dealing with some of these riotous. I went to Linden after after the incident was finished, and I had a meeting and so on and so forth. But I was not going to go to give them any satisfaction that I come in and talk to them while they were burning and blocking roads and all of that. I was not tolerant to that type of situation.
Do you have a role in the body politic
No.
anymore? You're completely in retirement now?
More or less.
What have you been up to?
Well, I've been doing a lot of the things that I wanted to do, researching some issues and so forth. I hope I get the time to probably write them up sometimes in the future.
Any chance the University of Guyana will be benefiting from the institution of your mind?
I don't know. I did 2 talks at UG. I did one on when it was the anniversary of the University of Guyana, because you know the University of Guyana was started by the PPP in 1963. Right. So in 2023, I did a talk there about the history of the university and the struggle to get it going, and what was the hopes and aspiration of those who created it. Dr. Jagan, C.V. Noons, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, who did a lot of work, he was a biologist. His son is a historian now, Drayton, Harold Drayton. Some of these people that they did a lot of work to get the UG going, and what they had envisaged that UG should be like, and how the PNC had opposed UG. Burnham used to call it Jagger Night School, and in a very derogatory way. And he said when he was in opposition in '63 that he would close the university down when he get into government, but he couldn't do it actually. So I had 2 things with them, but it's up to UG if they want to tap into my whatever little knowledge that I have. I don't mind sharing it with them, but it's not for me to go and ask them.
And your home community of Carricaria, have they been seeing you?
Not very. I haven't been there for more than a year. I go from time to time when some of the older folks passed away. Most of the time when I go to Carricaria now, it's attending funerals and so forth. Most of my relatives are not there any longer. So
what thoughts do you have for President Ali in his final term? Constitution allows him to go for 2 consecutive terms. These next 5 years are going to be very transformational, given the trajectory that Guyana is on, given the goodwill of the people towards the PPP, given the scope and credentials President Ali has been able to carve out for himself nationally, within CARICOM and on the global stage. What are your thoughts and words for him for the next 5 years?
Well, the last 5 years he did very well, and he has become extremely popular. I don't think I'll have anybody contradicting me to say that he's the most popular person in the country at this point in time. And for the next 5 years, I think that the work I envisage, based on the party's manifesto and everything else that they're doing, I think it will make him even more popular, that he could really have the 10 years that he would be there, that it would be probably one of the most fruitful and productive 10 years. And I wish him all the best. He has a lot of energy. I hope that he looks after his health and stays strong and continues to do what he's doing. He's on the right track.
And you plan on availing yourself in any way?
Well, I'm always available to the PPP. Okay. I'm always available. If they want me to do anything, I've never refused to do anything for the party.
Okay. We've been talking, having a very productive conversation with former President of Guyana, His Excellency Donald Ramotar. I'm sure his insightful thoughts on the 2025 elections, putting it in historical context, having been there in the belly of our body politic for so many decades, having served as General Secretary of the great PPP and now PPPC since 1992, as General Secretary for more than a decade. Certainly his perspectives must have been of value to you. We thank you very much for having joined us and staying tuned on Channel 6 and across the various social media platforms on which we stream. And we want to thank President Ramotar so much for spending the time with us and allowing us into your mind, into your thoughts. It's always a pleasure to hear from our elder statesmen whenever we can, and to benefit from the perspectives, historical as well as future-looking perspectives. And certainly history will continue to see President Ramotar very kindly. His legacy will be one that remains in our history book for our future generations to look at and perhaps be inspired. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll be back with you shortly.
Going to be whatever it is.
Well, sitting with him there, Microsoft founder Bill Gates, Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg, also on hand Tim Cook of Apple, and the CEOs of OpenAI and Google. Back now with the panel. So, Kara, I mean, this event would have been the first held in the newly renovated Rose Garden. It was moved inside because of weather. I mean, I get what... I mean, everybody is there. It's also transactional. I mean, everybody is there for a very specific reason.
So, yeah, they all want something, and they're all getting what they want. That's why they were at the inauguration. You know, oddly enough, I found a story I wrote in 2016 or 15, actually,